music, athletics, arts, and entertainment. The Desert Tiger Podcast with Colton Geschwantner.
That's right, it's that time again. It is Thursday, which means it is time for another episode of the DTP, your weekly look into the lives, the inspiration, the motivation, the journeys, and the stories of entertainers, whether they be musicians, athletes, comedians, actors. We get all sorts of different people. We mix everything up in this nice little mixing pot. We call it Desert Tiger, and we fix it up and serve it to you fresh every Thursday, every single week. And we are so thankful for you for joining us here on Desert Tiger on the DTP. Whether you are a returning listener or maybe you're new, maybe a friend brought you in, maybe you just came in from the cold, maybe you were scared outside. No matter what brought you to the DTP, we are extremely thankful that you joined us. We hope that you will hit that subscribe button on whatever service you are listening on, as that really does help the show. If you're listening on our website, there are links available on our website to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everything else like that as well. So all of that is in your hands. It is capable, so please use it as you wish. So let's kick things off. Alright, so today on the episode we are talking to Jeffery Straker. Don't call him Straker. Jeffery Straker, who is a folk pop musician from, well, I'm from the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan, but he's from a different middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan. And he is a piano singer, songwriter, master who comes in the veins of those like Billy Joel, Elton John, those classic piano rock storytellers that can weave a yarn that takes not only your ears but also your imagination on a journey across the chords and the bars that Mr. Jeffery Straker performs for you. So we're going to be giving you a look into the world of Jeffery Straker himself. We're going to be talking to him about his music, how he got into music, where it all started for him. We're going to be talking to him about how his music has evolved. His first album, songs about Saskatchewan, different stories about Saskatchewan, about his home, the places he's been, and the people he has seen. And from there, he sort of gets a little more personal. That's someone else's words, of course, but Jeffery learns to embrace all sorts of different things in his performances, in his presentation, in his storytelling. And I hope that you guys enjoy that just as much as I do. He has played sold-out shows with symphonies. He has won contests in countries in different continents and has gotten plays all over the world. He has done charity different events. He has written an entire score for a musical that has been played at the Globe Theatre in Regina. The man is a walking, talking, singing, songwriting masterpiece in the making, and I am extremely excited to present to you today my interview with Jeffery, don't call him Straker, Jeffery Straker. Of course, before we can get into that interview, we need to introduce you to Jeffery's music and play you a song of his. And before we can do that, we need to pay a few bills. So I'm going to start that off by telling you guys about how you can save 10% off some killer streetwear over at Collar and Elbow audible.com. If you go over to the Collar and Elbow web store when you're checking out, whether you buy a sick shirt, some comfy sweatpants, a killer hat, whatever it is you are picking up, you can save yourself 10% by using the code DTP when you are checking out. And I also need to tell you guys about how you can get 1 free month of Audible plus 1 free audiobook to get you started on Audible, to get you hearing, to get you reading, to get you learning, and to get you yearning for more information. You simply go on over to www.audible.com/DTP. It's that simple, it's that easy. 1 free audiobook, 1 free month of the Audible service at www.audible.com/DTP. Alright, so now that I've let you know how you can support the podcast besides sharing and subscribing, we need to get into a little bit of Jeffrey's music, introduce you to this singer-songwriter so that you can hear him with your own ears. This first song I am going to be playing for you today is called Beauty in the Gray.
Another view of the country from here behind the wheel. Coffee shakes and high hopes take the edge off and conceal doubts from all directions. Tonight's another stage, moth unto the lamplight, never to forsake, to forsake. So I fill the tank and chart the course and say my goodbyes. I miss my friends and my family. Oh, how I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. These voices in my head, whispering about the hunger, waiting to be fed. Some days I work for dollars, some days for dimes. I've rolled downhill, aimed for stars, I braved the steep inclines. I follow fate through the shadows, seeking beauty in the gray. I got wandering in my bones, and I let go, yeah, let my heart lead the way. I've got a pocket full of promises I've made to myself. Prophets on their bar stools say only time will tell. I've been thinking about the faces I never get to know. Don't let myself get too close, for to ease the letting go. Some days I work for dollars, some days for dimes. I've rolled downhill, aimed for stars, I braved the steep inclines. I follow fate through the shadows, seeking beauty in the gray. I got wandering in my bones, and I let go, yeah, let my heart lead the way. To lie, stumbles out again. Some days I work for dollars, some days for dimes. I've rolled downhill, aimed for stars, I braved the steep inclines. I follow fate through the shadows, seeking beauty in the gray. I got wandering in my bones,
Desert Tiger Podcast.
All right, we are here with piano master Jeffery Straker. How's it going, man?
It's going very well. We have to start it again, though, because it's Straker.
Oh,
You're
really?
You're close, yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
That's okay.
My bad entirely.
It gets mispronounced so much, but I'm so used to correcting everybody, so don't worry about it.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so besides that, how's it going?
It's going well.
Awesome. All right, super pleased that you could join us here on the DTP today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Hey, no worries at all. All right, so when did you end up getting into music? How did you get started with the piano?
Well, my mom is the culprit for that because she put myself and my siblings, my older brother and my younger sister, all into music lessons when we were, around 6 or 7 years old, just to give it a whirl because she's a piano player and she wanted us all to try the piano. She was of the same belief that I am of, that the piano is a great first instrument. And I think she was sort of thinking, hey, try this out, and if you want to branch into something else later, that'd be okay too, but this is a good starting point. And I was odd in that I really liked to practice. Like, it was like something I quite enjoyed doing. Who knows why? I liked to impress, or trying to impress, Mrs. Young, our local piano teacher in the rural Saskatchewan town where I was taking these lessons. So she had something to do with it. She taught in a way that I wanted to, make her think I was progressing, I guess. But yeah, so those lessons were the start of everything.
Okay, cool. What age were you when you, it was 6, like you said?
Yep, I was 6 years old, and it was a neat sort of situation in terms of getting to the lessons because the schools, the elementary school and the high school in a little town in Saskatchewan, a little town called Punashai, where I was going, they didn't have an arts program. There was no arts education. There was no music, etc. There were smaller rural schools, and I think money was tight. So what we had was a fairly forward-thinking principal who, his rule was, if you were taking private lessons from Mrs. Young, who would set up in a house across the street from the school, you could just walk out of whatever class you were in and go to your music lesson, which is pretty generous of him.
Very.
So that's what we did. Once a week, you'd have this half-hour lesson with Mrs. Young and, get better at the piano, and then you go back to school and sort of just pick up where you left off. And it's pretty great when you think about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It's awesome that even though they weren't able to give you a music program of their own, that they were willing to accommodate the growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty neat. So anyway, yeah. So I go once a week. I take my lesson, do some practicing in between, and it really grew over time. I mean, the more I think I realized myself that, although my lessons were kind of half an hour long, over time I gradually was practicing a little more and a little more and a little more because, you kind of realize after a while that the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it, right? So it was a bit of like scratching an itch for me in a way.
Fantastic. So it was something that you took to very easily.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there was music in our house growing up. Music was a big part of there were so many musicians in our family, and a lot of our neighbors were musicians. So, I got that it was I didn't look at it as like this sort of I didn't look at it as this thing that I was sort of like kind of trying out. I looked at it as this very legitimate thing that so many people around me were doing, was playing an instrument. So that context was really important.
Definitely. It's awesome that even in the small community that there was the conductive environment to allow the growth of what has become what I would say is a pretty successful career in music.
Yeah, it's neat to think back and to think how it was encouraged. I mean, it's not to say it was super easy because at the same time, as any rural Saskatchewan town was, and probably kind of is. I mean, real the thing that young boys should be doing is playing and being good at hockey. I played hockey, but I wasn't very good at it. I wasn't really interested in it. I really gravitated to music, and so I was kind of a little bit like, it wasn't like freaky, but I mean, it was a different thing to be doing, So luckily for whatever reason, I just sort of I ignored it because I liked it so much. It didn't really matter.
Fair enough. I mean, being someone from Saskatchewan who never played hockey, I can't really blame you. So, okay. So, how did your love of music and your teachings progress after that? Like, where did you end up going from there?
Well, there's a certain point when the lessons with Mrs. Young in that small town, like she handed me over to the teacher in the next town, who was sort of, was teaching at a bit of a higher level. And I went and studied with her for a while, and then she, after maybe sort of, I think 3-4 years or whatever it was, she handed me over. She said, you should be going into the university to study with a professor. And so in grade 10, 11, and 12, I was doing like an hour and a half drive in to Regina once a week to study with a professor at the conservatory, and it was like a really high level of classical piano studies, and like the repertoire was really heavy. But it was sort of, it was like you had to go there to get that kind of teaching, and I was quite interested in that at the time. I mean, it also was helpful because I really realized through those studies that being a classical piano performer, like that was not my aspiration. Like it was really good to realize. I was like, hey, you know what? I know what I don't want to do. I don't want to try to become a classical piano performer. Like that's just not my cup of tea. But though I really enjoyed my studies, it also helped me realize that, which I'm very grateful for. Ultimately when I was done those studies when I was 19, I realizing that I didn't want to be a classical performer, I was like, okay, I've got these great chops. Very grateful. Music will be my hobby, I thought, and then off I go to university to study science, and I thought I was going to go into either medicine or dentistry or something. And I never really thought music would be my jam. And then I rediscovered it in Toronto, basically.
Oh, really? So what ended up taking you out to Toronto then?
Well, it was a job at a university. I got a marketing, long story short, I got a marketing job out in Toronto. The company moved me out there, which was very nice. Mm-hmm. And then I was working in this job, which was a pretty good job. It's not that I didn't like it, and I was decent at it, but I simultaneously discovered this singer-songwriter scene in Toronto that I hadn't really I didn't know that this sort of existed. It was like discovering how to make crack cocaine in your bathtub. It was like, what? Like, this happens? Like, it was really weird. And so I was fascinated by it. And there were all these people, putting words to music, and none of them, frankly, were particularly, like, great musicians, but that wasn't the thing. The thing was, they could all play an instrument, and the focus was putting words to the music, and I was like, oh, this is really neat. Like I never thought of this before, and I really got into it, and so then that helped me realize, I think what I really want to do is make music. I would love to have music be my thing, my work, if you will, in the singer-songwriter vein. But this was very early on, right? So
definitely,
it's easier said than done. So I was writing songs and singing in open mics and stuff around Toronto, and that was fine. And I did notice that the more time I was putting into it and returning to open mics, like there's a few people starting to come back and listen again. I got a website made and, tried to let people know I was doing gigs and all that sort of stuff. And, just in a very small way, the more time I put into it, the more results I was getting. And so there was a point when I actually decided to quit the job. I thought, I was talking about it with my boss. I was like, I think I'm going to quit this job and just give music a whirl. And they made me this job, maybe this really great offer, where they said, well, what if you just do this job 3 days a week, and then that'll give you some time to experiment with putting more time into music. And I was like, whoa, that's a great offer.
Definitely.
No, so I did that, and then of course the problem was the more I had, putting more time and energy into my music and have more time to write and promote and stuff. I was then I was seeing, although it was very small, I was seeing more results. So then the step left, as curiosity was killing the cat, was, well, I think the last step here would be seeing what would happen if I put all my time and energy into music. And but that was really hard. Like ultimately making that choice to walk away from a job where the paycheck and there were benefits and it was fairly secure.
Well,
and
stability, right?
Stability, and in all honesty, like there's people who go to MBA school and like really like study for years to try to get this job. So it wasn't like a shitty job. And I was like, oh, this is really hard. But I mean, what do I do? And long story short, I went and visited just by chance a great aunt of mine who was in an old folks home out in Etobicoke, Ontario, and she had Alzheimer's. And I had this very profound realization of how limited our time is here on this earth, particularly with our faculties about us. And I was like, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, like, what am I waiting for? So I quit my job, recorded a CD, and off I went. And I'm kind of condensing it, but I mean, that is pretty much the gist of the story. Like, the big kick in the pants to go do what I ultimately knew I wanted to try was visit to this great aunt in an old folks home, and she had Alzheimer's, and I had this realization that, there is no reason to wait for anything. Like, just try it, right?
Yeah.
Luckily, my parents gave me a really good upbringing and made me realize, like, you can try anything. You might not succeed. The odds, in fact, odds are that you probably won't succeed at many of the things you do try in life, but give it a try, right? So off I went. And it was music is it's very hard work. It's never ending. You have to hustle constantly. At the outset, results were small and slow, but they were there. And I never had grand aspirations of wanting to be, overnight, like Justin Bieber. Like that was never anything I had my sights set on. I was like, I just want to be able to make this be my living. And it was certainly from the first year I carved out enough of a living to make it be my living, and it's got better ever since.
Awesome. So what was that first album? Was that Songs from Highway 15?
That is the one, yeah.
Okay, so that one was pretty based on your life in Saskatchewan, was it not?
It was all songs and stories, exactly like you said, all songs and stories of people and places in Saskatchewan. Most of them weren't about me. They were about people and places that I observed either growing up or in visits back to Saskatchewan when I was living in Toronto. So, I didn't understand how it was going to be received. I had no idea. I mean, it was kind of a folky piano record. Not a lot of production, just some a first kick at the can at the songs. But what I think what I've learned in hindsight through that was, especially at the time, it's changed a bit now, but Saskatchewan is one of those places that, though it has spawned lots of musicians and songwriters, there's not a lot of people writing about Saskatchewan, for example, like there are, but in comparison to, say, the Maritimes, where their lexicon of words and music about their geography is ginormous, we don't do it the same. And so, and it wasn't that I set out trying to add to that sort of, or discography or poetry or whatever about the prairies. I wasn't trying to do that, but, it wasn't in my mind. But sort of unconsciously, that's kind of what I did. Like, I made this record of songs about the prairies, and people really responded really well. So it worked quite well. People started to come to little shows, and they were buying the CD, and it was a really nice beginning.
Awesome. So then how did your music progress from there? Because, like, having an album that's basically based on stories and people from Saskatchewan, I mean, how did your music and your songwriting evolve, like, through Step Right Up and your albums after that?
Well, it was interesting because, I mean, if no one ever gives you a handbook on how to do, quote unquote music, just like they don't you a handbook on how to go be an author. Like, you just kind of, you got to figure it out as you go along. And my next record, I was writing songs, just whatever was coming to me out at the time. The record ended up being Step Right Up, and I went to a Sask music workshop, and this producer, Justin Gray, who was doing part of the workshop, became really interested in what I was writing, and approached me after the workshop and said, "Hey, I'd like to record some of this," and I was flattered, and we went off and made the record that became Step Right Up, and it was a very poppy record in comparison to my first record, and we made part of it in Toronto and part of it in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. There's a long story why that happened, but it made sense. It made sense, and then I released it, and it's a very different sound than anything I had made up till that point. Mm-hmm. It's a very different sound than anything I've made ever since, because it's quite sort of like pop cabaret sounding, and a pretty polished production. And it's not where my ship is pointed now. The crazy thing is, it's sold, I've sold over I think 7,000 or 8,000 copies of that at shows, and of course, now that I have other records out, it's not my new records are selling, or what I sell at shows now. But I mean, at the time, people bought more of that record than any record. It was the strangest thing. And I mean, what I since learned, there's people who win Junos who don't sell 7,000 CDs. I didn't understand that it was quite significant, actually. So I'm really proud of that record. And some people who come to my shows, they, that's the one that they like. But I mean, now my stuff is way more sort of rootsy, folky, and that's really what I feel is me. Because from Step Right Up, that record, I mean, what I did learn was that people were really, they were saying nice things about my lyrics, and reviewers were saying nice things about my lyrics, and so what I think over time what I've done is I've just sort of, I've probably migrated subconsciously to a more folk root sound. A, because I really like that sound. It's kind of actually what I grew up with. But B, it's a sound that allows listeners, I think, to really focus on the lyrics and the story that the lyrics are telling.
Mm-hmm. Did that change back to the folk thing sort of happen over the progression of your albums? Was that just a certain decision you decided to make on this latest album, or how did that work?
Well, I don't it's probably, I guess it was gradual. I mean, there's always been I think the artistic director of the Calgary Folk Club has put it best, I think. And I mean, she gets I don't know, 1,000 at least applications from acts across the country to perform at her folk club. It's sort of the granddaddy of all folk clubs in the country. Mm-hmm. And she heard some of my songs, and she's become a really big fan. And she said, she said, it's so funny. She said, you're such a folk songwriter, but she said sometimes you serve up those folk songs with a pop blanket, wrapped around them. She said, but anybody who listens to folk music would they would obviously hear the stories in your songs, and that's why she became such a big fan. And she'd booked me a couple times for her folk club. Mm-hmm. So even though the sonics wrapped around these lyrics was quite poppy during when I made my Step Right Up record, and over the next sort of, I guess, 4 or so records, mm-hmm. it's less poppy. I actually think the lyrics have always been kind of similar in that they've been telling stories, and they've been recounting, and they've been chronicling. It's just sort of what I feel natural doing. Mm-hmm.
Dirt Road Confessionals is said to be your most personal storytelling of it all. Is that just because you've become more comfortable over time, or what's the reason for that?
I don't know. I mean, it was a reviewer who said that, and I mean, I'm always interested in hearing what people say. I mean, I would like to think that each of my records has been kind of personal, because it's words and feelings coming out of me that I'm setting to music. But probably this one, it just does have some very personal story songs in it. I mean, one thing, a thing that some of my past albums did was it had songs that were stories about other people. Mm-hmm. Whether it was, a person from my small town I grew up in, to a song actually about the great Aunt Mary who had Alzheimer's, to, etc. A lot of observing and recounting, and people, which is a very folk thing to do. And people, listeners really appreciated that. But on this record, there's a very personal song. There's a song called "Walking Shoes" that's dedicated to my dad, and it's a thank you song to my dad for being a good dad. And there's a song called "1,000 Miles Away" that's like a love song that I'm singing to Saskatchewan. Although, I don't say the word Saskatchewan in it, but it's a love song to a geography. And a lot of people have heard that song, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, like that could be a song about like a lover," but I totally get that it's about a geography. So there are some very personal feelings on it that I'm very proud of the way they've come across. Who knows? There's probably listeners out there who would say, "Oh, that's not your most personal album at all," because everyone has different thoughts, right?
Yeah, definitely. This album took a little bit of work to record. You guys did it in 5 studios, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it ended up being 5 studios, and that was sort of part of my wish with it, was that all of my past records have all been made with one producer in one studio, or one producer, and maybe we've ended up using a couple studios or whatever, just because of you'd use a big room to do like the live off the floor band stuff, and then go to a smaller room to do vocals or something. But it was always one producer. And so this time around, I had all these producers that I'd sort of met through my travels and my work and festival playing or whatever that I wanted to work with. And I asked myself, I was like, why do people generally think you need to use only one producer to make a record? And of course, the answer that people would tell themselves is that it's for cohesiveness across your record. With the answer 1. Answer 2 is that logistically, doing it with one person is simply easier. It's like one set of communication, one set of emails, one person to align with, etc. But I thought, well, what's the risk with trying this with having, say, if there are 12 songs on the record or 10 songs, in having 5 producers each do 2 songs? Well, a risk, if you want to call it that, would be that maybe your record doesn't sound cohesive. Like that could be a risk. And I thought about it, and I was like, it's my voice and my piano playing across all the songs, and my songwriting. So there's a pretty firm through line across all these songs, and I'm going to be present in the studio as each of these producers is bringing these to life. So I understand the continuity. And as I talked it through to myself, I was like, there is no risk. There's really no the logistically, it's obviously harder because you're traveling to different people or they're traveling to you, and it involves a bit more airfare and finding some accommodation, etc. But my hope was that I wanted to have the songs across the album sounding fresh. Because to be honest with you, I've heard an awful lot of records where one producer makes them and everything sounds the same. And so that's the risk of using one producer who is afraid to be adventurous. Everything sonically it's boring. So, and I didn't want that. So, I was like, I convinced myself that for this record, the right thing to do was work with these various people who I really trusted and really liked the past sounds that they'd made, and their past work wasn't all, completely different from each other. And I was like, let's do this. So I'm really happy I did it. I'm really happy with the record.
That's awesome. I really actually enjoy the thought process behind that, and how just weighing the risks of just doing it with one producer as opposed to multiple. That's a really good way to look at it.
And another one, of course, too, there's an economics part of it too that weighs into it too. I've never actually sort of priced it out this way, but I'm thinking from my collective past experience. If you're doing a full record with the producer, you kind of get a bit more of a deal by doing more songs with one person. So economics play into this too. I didn't care about that too much. I had a pretty hefty factor grant that paid for a good chunk of the record. And I had some funding from Creative Saskatchewan as well. So, I wasn't, and of course I paid for a portion of it too, but, economics didn't really play into it. Because to me, at the end of the day, I was like, what will make this music sound the best? That was sort of the ultimate driving factor, right? So, awesome.
So let's get into some of the lyrics behind some of the songs on Dirt Road Confessional. Let's get into one of the singles off that album that has a very fun music video, Boom Boom.
Boom Boom.
Can you tell me about that one?
Well, Boom Boom is a love song at the heart of it. It's a fun, up-tempo love song. And it was one that had been bouncing around in my head for quite some time. And finally, and in fact, I think I had it even written, maybe even one of the first songs written just after my last record. And I was never really sure if it would go on a record, because I was like, I wonder if this would fit with other songs. But as I sat with the producer who worked on that one, Brad Prosco in Regina, and realized that it could come to life in a really almost country roots kind of way, I was like, yeah, this is a great fun song, and a lot of people have really liked it on the recording, so I'm pretty happy with it.
Awesome. What was making the music video like for that one? Getting all different people to get videos and everything. Was it difficult to get input on that, or how did that all come together?
Well, so the music video is set in a photo booth in a mall, so it involves an awful lot of people getting in and out of this booth doing photos, and it's people along with something that they love, because the song is, you're putting back a little boom boom in my heart, so getting your heart ticking a little bit faster, and it's sort of a fun play on that. And so people are entering this photo booth with a person they love, a child they love, or a pet, or a photo of someone or something they've loved. Like it's this video of love, and it's fun. And so luckily, the video production company that I worked with out of Regina, they're called Wavelength Entertainment. They did the scheduling, but like collectively, them and myself, like we used social media to round up the people, and it was actually not hard to get people to offer up their time to be in the video. The hardest part, which is what the video production company did, was like scheduling in the shoot, because that was a lot of people to schedule in. But God bless them, Chris and Steve Allen from Wavelength Entertainment. They're so darn good. So it was great working with them.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. It's a really awesome video to watch.
Yeah.
Let's get into another song on the album, one of my personal favorites, I think. Queen of Broken Souls.
The Queen of Broken Souls was actually written, I want to say like maybe 3-4 years ago. 3 years ago with a co-writer in Toronto. Her name's Karen Kozowski, former Winnipeg girl, and now she was in Toronto for quite a while, and I believe she's actually living in Nashville now, but she's a really wonderful writer, and she's actually working mostly as a producer these days, with some pretty, up and coming, like, I actually think, like, we'll be hearing lots about Karen in like 2 years. Everyone will be like, oh my God, I want to work with Karen Kozowski. So her and I co-wrote this song, and it's set, like, it's very much a story song, and it's set in a piano bar, probably in Las Vegas, but I'm not really sure. And there's this washed-up rock star woman playing the piano and singing cover songs, of course, in a smoky piano bar. Everyone's sitting around at the bar drinking, not really listening to her. And it is every musician's worst nightmare. And she's sort of in her head, she's recalling where she once was, that she was this rock star singing in big audiences, and now that's all done. Got to make a living, and she's singing cover songs in a piano bar, and it's a very sad song, but people really like it.
It hits a chord. It just does.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you like it.
I really do. I mean, solid work on the album overall. I've been crushing it for the last week since we booked this interview, and I'm just love it just as much as when it came out.
A lot. Well, and that one in particular, like, I know when Karen and I sat down, we're like, we thought, writing-wise, we thought it would be a bit Leon Russell, Elton John-ish. That's sort of how it was evolving. And then when I went to produce it, it was actually I wasn't sure it was going to fit sonically on this record. And then once the record, there were 11 songs done, and I was like, man, there's a story that this record is telling, but there's a missing chapter. Because the record very much overall, just to talk about this for a second, talks to two sort of themes that that are juxtaposed. Like one is the idea of a musician being on the road, out there chasing a dream, which we all kind of do. Like we're not, we're not like what's the word, like failingly chasing a dream. Like we're out there, like we're living a dream, but in the process we're running around a lot, kind of chasing things, right? So there's artists doing that, but what you give up in doing that is you give up a quote unquote normal life where you're in one place all the time, which allows you to, have a partner, have a plant, and so stability and chasing a dream and being on the go, those two themes butted heads. And so when I put the 11 songs together, I was like, man, there's something missing here. And then I realized, oh my God, the Queen of Broken Souls song, that's the missing chapter in this book. So that, it made it on the record, and I went to Robin D'Alonso in Toronto, who's also now living in Nashville as of last year. And I said, hey, Robin, I've got this piano ballad that I think you do a great job producing. And she jumped on it, and she did such a great job.
Mm-hmm. Solid work all around. All right, Jeffrey, I have so many more questions to ask you. We need to talk about how you've gotten into working with symphonies. I want to talk to you about the recent musical you ended up working on, all these different things. In fact, I even want to ask you about what some of your favorite songs in your catalog are. But of course, before I do that, I need to tell the fine listeners here at the DTP a little bit more about Collar and Elbow. You already heard me tell you about how using the code DTP when you are checking out a Collar and Elbow is going to save you 10% on this fantastic looking streetwear. But did you hear me tell you about just how comfortable the Collar and Elbow clothing is? Just how stylish, how sleek, how it fits. And they have so many sizes for so many different body types, and they look good on everybody. Go and check out the store right now. There's so many different items for so many different types of personalities, and Collar and Elbow actually encourages that you alter and customize their clothing, that you tag them in these photos, because they like to stay on the cutting edge of fashion, and they want to know what the people like. So head on over to the Collar and Elbow store, pick up yourself some clothing, use the code DTP, save yourself 10%, everybody wins, you save money, you look good, that's what you want. Okay, so you guys are going to hear a bit more about this song when I get back into this interview with Jeffery Straker. But right now, this is Get What You Give.
You might pray for love, try to coax it your way. Cross your fingers to the point of breaking, 'cause you just need a place for your heart to go to soothe the aching. With those 3 words you got tucked at the back of your mind, you know what you want, but it's hard to describe. You go looking for it, or let it find you, pretend to kill some time. Place poetic quotes and old picture frames and wishbones and clover and fallen star games. It's hope reaching out, trying to tap on the shoulder of fate. Oh, do you fear for the break? Hold on to what ifs. Know the truth of the heart lies in the lessons you live. When it comes to love, it seems you get what you give. Scared to say hello to. The moments slip by like a ghost, and you were caught between what's meant to be and what it meant to you. those three words sitting there at the back of your throat. You wanna move them to your lips where they matter the most. Be proud you said it, wear that smile around like the warmest winter coat. Do you fear for the break? Hold on to what ifs. Know the truth, the heart lies in lessons you live. When it comes to love, it seems you get what you give. While a pawn shop is selling off old wedding rings, you feel a tug at your sagging heartstrings. A widow places flowers on a grave she's been tending. You see newlywed tears under confetti spray, couple one table over with nothing left to say. Words struggle to hold the heavy of all that weight. But you put it together and you come to know the greater the heart, the more cracks it can hold. While a small part of you knows that at some point might be too late. So do you fear for the break? Hold on to what ifs. Know the truth of the heart lies in lessons you live. When it comes to love, it seems you get what you give. Oh, do you fear for the break? Hold on to what ifs. Know the truth of the heart lies in lessons you live. When it comes to love, it seems you get what you give.
That is a truly beautiful song, you guys. And like I said, you're going to hear more about Get What You Give when I ask Jeffrey himself about what some of his favorite songs from over his 12 years of releasing music are. But of course, before I get into that, I need to tell you guys a little bit more about Audible. Audible is a fantastic audiobook service, and if you're like me, maybe you're spending a lot of time on the road, doing dishes, walking the dog, maybe you're at work, mowing the lawn, whatever it is you're doing, maybe you just don't have the time to actually sit down and look at a good book. Well, that's where Audible and Desert Tiger come in. If you go to www.audible.com/DTP, not only are you going to get one free month of the Audible service, but you're also going to get one free audiobook. They give you a token that you can use on any book that is in the Audible system. No matter what it costs, no matter what the genre, no matter what it is. If you need an Audible book suggestion, may I suggest Love is the Cure, written by and narrated by Elton John himself. You can get your hands on your free copy of Love is the Cure by going on over to www.audible.com/DTP. All right, you guys, without further ado, it's time to get back into this interview with Jeffery Straker.
the Desert Tiger Podcast.
Okay, do you have... I know this is asking a parent to pick their favorite child, but do you have any favorite songs from your catalog? Any ones that truly strike a chord with you yourself or mean the most to you?
I mean, there's a few off this last record that are sort of my current favorites of mine, I guess. One is the first song, Beauty in the Gray, and it's because it sort of sums up how I view what it is that I do, which is write songs, get in the car, and drive all over the country and like fly to Europe and Latin America to perform them. And basically the song Beauty in the Gray, which is the opening track, is all about the idea that if you open yourself up to the possibility, there are wonderful surprises to be had and to be seen anywhere if you let yourself see them. And it's kind of how I've learned to live each day, which sounds a little Pollyanna, but it's true. Like, I've really learned to embrace the notion that, like, you know, I don't know what next week's going to bring, but it could be fun if I approach it with the idea that it could be fun. You know, if I look at next week and say next week's going to suck, next week's probably going to suck. So, you know, I don't. I really look at things through the lens of, there could be something really neat here. And so that song sort of, to me, sums up how I'm approaching not just music, but I think, like, you know, my life in general. And so that's why it's kind of my current favorite. And people really like it at shows, too, which is lovely that, you know, it also goes over well with an audience. And then there's probably, like, I mean, there's a few more off this record. There's one called Get What You Give, which is sort of a song about the notion of love being reciprocal, in that, you know, if you're ever sitting around having a bum day thinking like, oh, you know, the world's conspiring against me and like this day is not going well, like what my current thinking is anyway, is that like what one should do is ask themselves, well, how much quote unquote good or love or whatever are you putting out into the world? Because what you're going to get back is directly proportionate. And I'm a believer that what you're getting back, you know, is a reflection of what you've been putting out. So the song is all about that. Last one I'll mention is way back off songs from Highway 15 in 2006. A song called The Wonderful Mrs. Bell, which is still kind of a favorite at shows, which is the weirdest thing to me. But it's a song about a lady of East Indian descent who lived in my small prairie town of Punashai, where I grew up. And our town was mostly First Nations people and, you know, white people of some European descent. And there was this family, the Bells, and Mrs. Bell from that family was very traditional, and she wore a sari in around the streets, and she had a bindi mark on her forehead, and you know, she was just like she was wearing her culture, really. She was where she was from, but she looked, in the process of doing that, she looked very different, and people as a result didn't really talk to her, and the song is about that. And it's really amazing how I'll be like in the merch line at the after show, and like people will come up and they'll say like, "Oh my, is that song Mrs. Bell? Like, I'm kind of Mrs. Bell," and it'll be like, you know, some big white trucker. but it's fascinating. Like because it's literally a song about Mrs. Bell, but people somehow, for some reason, are really able to insert themselves into her, which is, you know, into her persona, which is quite fascinating to me to this day.
Well, it is. Everybody sort of draws their own feeling from a song and their own conclusion from it. So to know that people are able to connect with that character and feel like that character, that really stands to, like, for your songwriting ability.
I hope so. You know, like but the weird thing was, like, I was really green when I wrote that song, and there's a weird lesson to be learned in that, I think, which I don't think I've learned it yet, but I mean, there's something about it where like I wasn't trying to do anything with the song. Like, I wasn't trying to teach a lesson. I was literally telling a story. And within the story, somewhere deep within its layers, there is a lesson, but I wasn't trying to write the lesson. I was, so there's something there that I'm sure I'll figure out someday. But it's fun. It's fun to see it sort of doing its thing,
Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the road, through the stories and the faces, it'll just click for you, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
All right, so you've done quite a bit of touring on the road. You've played multiple different festivals, different countries. Do you have any favorite experiences or stories from your travels?
Oh gosh. Well, there's there's so many experiences. Part of my problem these days is I'm on the go so much that it's kind of all blurring together. There's a few specific things that really stand out. Like, there was a concert I did with the full Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra in TCU Place in Saskatoon in 2013. The room was sold out. There were like 2,100 people there. It was like a full symphony orchestra and me and a band. And like, it wasn't the first full orchestra show I'd done. I think it was like the second full orchestra show that I'd done at that point in time. But first time playing with that orchestra, and it was one of those nights where I've never been able to figure out how to make this happen, but all the stars aligned. The audience was on fire. The orchestra was like energized. The band killed it, and like it was such a crazy night that I still had people coming up to me in Saskatoon and talking about it. Like it was really weird, but wonderfully weird, So that one has always stood out to me. And then on the total flip side, like, there have been moments, like one thing I like playing is house concerts. I don't know, like, I'm sure your listeners, you might know what they are, but essentially it's like a concert in someone's living room. Yeah. And you're playing generally to a minimum of 25 people, but they can be as big as, depending on the house, like 60 or 70 people. But some of those nights in people's living room with everyone who's listening to you within eyesight, and you can see everyone's facial expression, and it's pin drop quiet, and everyone's listening, and like those can be such magic moments, And I do sort of like about 15 or 20 of those in a year. I do about 120 shows in total a year. So like, those are neat little moments where, because you can get kind of caught up in like ripping around from show to show, and the pace of it can be like a lot. But I find house concerts, like once you get to it and set up and play for those audiences in those very intimate settings, they're very therapeutic. They really remind you why you're doing this. Pretty neat.
Definitely. I was talking with my girlfriend last night where I was saying there's this venue in Kamloops that is literally just this couple's basement that houses 35 people, and I was like, man, it would be perfect for Jeffrey.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, well, no, I'm curious. Is it called? Wait a second. There's something I just heard of in Kamloops. No, I think the one I heard of was a cafe. It was some kind of cafe. What is this one called? Maybe I've heard of it.
Basement.
No, that's a great name for a basement.
Yeah.
So funny.
Yeah, no, it's literally you just set up a show with them, and then like everybody that comes is just, you have to say that you're RVSPing, and
yep,
it's just 35 people inside this couple's basement, and it's a fantastic little environment. So I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, they're very lovely events.
Yes, they are. It's just so connected, and it's got this neat little community feel to it, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. And unlike a bar or, some of the places you would end up playing at when you tour, where invariably, not every night, but often, there's someone who doesn't understand that if there's a singer-songwriter singing, you should probably shut up and listen. House concerts never have that problem. Like the rule, the unspoken rule, and sometimes the spoken rule, just to remind people at a house concert, is that you listen. And that's partly why they're so wonderful, because rooms where, like smaller rooms, where uninterrupted listening happens, there are fewer fewer and far between. So house concerts are a real gem.
Yes, they definitely are. Okay, so let's get into some of your influences. Who were your high school idols? Who are the musicians that you couldn't live without?
Oh, it's so funny because I was a weird high school kid. I mean, I was listening to actually a lot of classical music, because I was studying so much of it. But I mean, when I was listening to what I guess people would call pop music, it was pretty folky. Like I liked Joni Mitchell, and I liked Neil Young, and I liked like Gordon Lightfoot, like stuff like that. You know, it was really storytelling music that I really liked. Now, at the same time, that's what I really, really, really liked. Now, I had vices, of course. Like, oh my God, like I listened to all sorts of pop and all that too. And even when I was like a little kid, like my parents had a lot of like country music going on at their house, like their records and 8 tracks for like country music and stuff, you know, like. But really, for me, it's always been sort of pretty folky stuff that I like. But of course, probably who I gravitated to, like I remember sort of discovering when I kind of discovered Billy Joel. That was pretty magical because there was this guy who wrote his words and his music, performed it on the piano with a pop sort of in a pop envelope, but it was really story songs. Like when you listen, like his songs tell stories. Like at the end of the day, like more so than Elton John's. Elton John's the lyrics that Elton John sings as a singer, as the other sort of famous singer pianist, it's more, I would say, poetry to music, whereas Billy Joel, I would say, is more stories to music. You know, each of those things made them very popular and famous. But for some reason, I really loved early Billy Joel. Like I thought it was so fascinating that this guy, you know, as a kid took piano lessons and then ended up doing that. It was really neat.
Mm-hmm. No, I love Billy Joel, so I understand that entirely.
And of course, like early Elton stuff too. I mean, as a singer, someone who ended up playing piano and singing, I mean, of course, I listened to a lot of Elton John and checked out what it was that he was doing. Another one was Ray Charles. Like I really loved Ray Charles, and I still do. What he did in taking, especially some more traditional gospel songs, and sort of like, putting them on his Ray Charles steroids. Like it's pretty neat the way he sort of morphed it. And such a great musician and such a great voice. And at the same time, another one of the sort of, I guess I'd put her in more of a folk categorization, but she has had some pretty big pop songs, is Carole King. Like I loved and do love Carole King. And the thing about her that I always thought was fascinating was like her words ripped my heart out. I never ever thought she was a good singer. Like I was like, Carole, like if someone said who's a great singer, like she honestly would be nowhere near the top of my list. But it didn't matter because her voice really matched. Somehow it told her lyrics so well. And people like her, or people like Willie Nelson, or people like Johnny Cash, all taught me, indirectly, that you don't have to be a quote-unquote stellar, perfect vocalist to be a good singer. That in fact, probably, and I do believe this, that in fact, an imperfect voice, in the truest sense of like, being studied, an imperfect voice is better. Like more character in a voice, giving it something really identifiable is better. And I've never found myself to be like, I would never say I'm the world's most incredible vocalist, but I've had it played back to me. Like people say, oh, if I hear you singing a song, I definitely know it's you, which I'm really grateful for better or for worse, I suppose. But all that, but yeah, but so all those were acts that for various reasons I was listening to.
Awesome. It sounds like a very, very good collection to draw inspiration from.
It's pretty eclectic, at the same time, like my parents had like all the ABBA records.
Yeah.
I know. So I remember like I'd like put those on the turntable and like, blare those too because, they were there to play. And I mean, there's lessons to be learned there in terms of like why have they sold the most records ever in the history of records? It's pretty crazy. So if you sort of listen and it's I can guarantee you it's not really about those songs. It's not about the stories they're telling through the lyrics. Like I swear, when you really listen to ABBA songs, like some of the lyrics, God bless them, are horrific. But that doesn't matter. Like what you have to look at is like that clearly didn't affect their ability to connect with people. Like, I swear it was back translated Swedish. Like some of the lyrics are preposterous, but it's still fun, and even their love songs connected with people, like they did something obviously incredibly right. So I'm a firm believer, like there's lessons, like even if I'm listening to a record that someone lent me or a CD that someone throws in my car or says, listen to this on Spotify, even if it's something that I might not say, this isn't my jam, I often listen anyway, but through the filter of, what are they doing? What are they saying? How are they saying it? You can learn from everywhere, I just love exploring new music, which is probably why everything I listened to in this high school time you're talking about was so eclectic. Cause like, there wasn't anything I didn't really like, except heavy metal. I never really liked that. My brother was a headbanger. I wasn't.
Understandable. I mean, one's got to go a different direction, right?
That's right.
All right. So what does the future hold for Jeffery Straker?
Oh my goodness. If I knew, I'd be working on it. No, I mean, so I guess a couple things. So my last record, Dirt Road Confessional, was very good to me by way of bookings. Like I crossed Canada once, I've crossed it again a half time, and by the end of this year I'll have crossed the country again a full time. So 2 national tours, a tour of Europe, and shows in Latin America. I see some more, there's a 2019 European tour happening. There's more Latin American dates. There's tons of Canadian gigs all throughout the year. Debut at the National Arts Centre in November. A return gig with the Saskatchewan Symphony at TCU Place in October. The full orchestra playing to a couple thousand people again. So like there's some very sweet gigs coming up. And, I'm busier than I want to be, which is good. Like my mantra with working in the arts is when it rains, run around with a bucket because it might stop raining. So, but my problem in all this, to start answering your question, is that I really have to start doing more carving out more time for writing, and because I've got to think of the next album. So, is the next album an EP? Is it an LP? Is it a series of singles? I'm working on that now. So my next 18 months will definitely see a new record being released. I don't know yet what that's going to be. So I'm very excited about the idea. Mm-hmm. I wrote the score for a musical, which is a first for me. It rehearsed and got its first run, a 20-show run at Regina's Globe Theatre with the playwright Kelly Jo Burke, a Saskatchewan playwright. She's amazing. Mm-hmm. And it was received very well. And so now that looks like it will have second and third productions elsewhere in the country.
Oh, wow.
So that'll take some time to work on that a bit more. It will need some edits, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then somewhere in that I've got to breathe a bit. So I'll try to do that too.
Definitely. How did you end up getting into working with the Globe Theatre?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll make it short, or I'll try. The deal was Kelly Jo wrote a play.
Yeah.
And so it was she reached out to me and said, "Hey, I love your songs. There's 4 of them in particular that I think would fit really well in this play, like as incidental music. Do you mind if I use them?" And I said, knock yourself out. But can I read the script just for fun? And I read her script, and I really loved it. And it's a story set at a camp, a fictitious camp for LGBTQ youth only. Like only queer young kids can go to this camp. Yeah. And I was like, well, this is a really fantastic idea because the crux of the story was, so what happens when you live your life being different, but what happens then when you're spending time at a summer camp where you're no longer different? Like, so what happens then? I was like, God, that's a great question. Like, I love. So I says to her, you know what? I want to write you 4 new songs instead of using these existing songs. I'll make you something that will fit even better. And then 4 became 8, became 12, became 17, and then the play became a musical. So it was a very weird, I kind of, drank the Kool-Aid. Like, I really loved her story, and she was really liking the songs I was writing to fit with the story. So, so at a certain point, it started evolving as a, she was re-editing the script and I was writing songs to the re-edited script, and it became this very much a collaboration. And so it was received really well. And then we did a sing through, read through, just some of the scenes, her reading them and me singing some of the songs a year and a half ago at kind of a house concert setting in Regina. And like 80 people bought tickets and just came to hear what we were doing. And one of the people at the show was the artistic director of the Globe Theatre. And she really liked what she heard, and she made us an offer to license it. So it was very weird how it happened, but it was really wonderful. And I learned so much about writing. Like, as a songwriter, it was an incredible experience because what I was doing then, I was writing songs that were from the thoughts and feelings of the characters in the play, not me. So these were not my experiences I was writing about. These weren't my feelings. These weren't my thoughts. These were all the background and the life of characters that lived in Kelly Jo's head. And I was having to write from that perspective, and what a writing challenge that was. Like, really wonderful. Like, I learned so much. So grateful for the experience, and like, who knows, maybe someday when I have 3 more years to write another score, we'll make another one.
Hopefully someday I can also see it for myself.
Yeah, I hope so too.
That's it. As if I was still in Regina, I definitely would have made it out to it.
Yeah, well, hopefully it plays in BC somewhere near you, and if it does, I will let you know.
If it does, I will drive to wherever it is playing in BC.
Okay.
All right, so before I ask you my last question, where can my listeners and your listeners find you?
2 places I'll point people to, and thank you for asking that question. So first place I would point people to is my website, which is jeffstraker.com, JEFFSTRAKER.com. And that has like a homepage feed of like recent news, and there's also music player there, and there's a list of all my updated concerts. And you can also grab CDs off there if you want to. The second place I'd point people to is just Spotify. Everything I've ever, almost everything, not everything, but almost everything I've recorded is on Spotify, and like, for better or for worse, you can listen to it all for free there. So do go, if you're interested in hearing some of the songs I've talked about, go to Spotify and have a listen and see what you think.
All right, fantastic. All right, so last question. If you could say one thing to your fans, your supporters, over the now 12 years of you releasing music, touring, and chasing this dream, what would you say to them?
Oh, I would have to just say thank you. First of all, in life, I don't think we pause enough and say thank you. We're in such a rush these days that thank you has almost become a forgotten phrase in a way. I try to do it as much as I can, but for sure, to these people whoever bought my music, listened to my music, shared my music, or particularly bought a ticket to a show and came and experienced one of my live shows, just like, I have to say a heartfelt thank you so much, because that is what has enabled me and allowed me to do what it is that I love to do and have it become my work. And the crazy thing is, I'm blessed to do something that does not feel like work. It's time that I spend each day, and I am very grateful for that.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thanks for doing the chat. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm extremely blessed. Thank you. All right, you guys, it's that time where we need to give a big old Desert Tiger thank you to Jeffery Straker for joining us here on the podcast. and sharing his stories, his experiences, and his journey with you and me on the DTP. I also need to take this time to thank you guys, the listeners of the Desert Tiger podcast. Like I said earlier, whether you're returning or whether you're new to this dance, if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it amongst your friends or whoever you think would enjoy it. If you enjoyed the show and you have yet to subscribe, we are available on multiple platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and CastBox. We're literally on over 40 different services, so please get out there and subscribe to one of them. You can also find us at our website, www.deserttigerentertainment.com, which is going to be getting a serious upgrade soon. Keep your eyes open for that. You can connect with us on social media if you guys want to. We're on Facebook, we are on Instagram, and of course we are on Twitter. You can look up Desert Tiger Podcast on all of them. On Facebook, we're Desert Tiger Entertainment, but looking up Desert Tiger alone will help lead you to our page where you can like us and stay in touch with what is next and what is fresh here with the DTP. We have some very exciting shows coming up in the future here. We have a lot of variation. We have a lot of different musicians. We're going to have different athletes with different levels of talent, with different stories to tell. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be awesome. So like I said, you guys want to subscribe now because you do not want to miss out on anything that we have coming up here in the future of the Desert Tiger podcast. So, like we like to do things, you know we either like to end things off with a song or a quote. So today we're going to end things off with a little bit of a quote to get you inspired, motivated, put a little bit of fire inside you so that you can tackle your day. So this is a quote from Sir Elton John himself. Music has healing power. It has the ability to take people out of themselves for a few hours.
The Desert Tiger Podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review. iTunes, Google Play Music, and Stitcher. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Thanks for listening.